Hey everybody, Dave Lindbergh in Hong Kong with another episode of the THD Podcast. Thanks for checking us out. Today we have a company from Sweden joining us talking about personalized audio. They've got some pretty cool stuff going on, and we're going to find out about Audiodo in a moment. But without delay, let's remind people to check out our sponsor, the Alti Association. They have an event coming up in Arizona in March of next year. So it's a little summit on audio for audio technologies and speaker manufacturers. So we encourage people to go check that out. And without delay, let's get into meeting everybody. All right. So Michel Roche from Audiodo, Chief Sales Officer. Good morning, Michel.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Great. And Jonas Eklund, Senior Research Engineer at Audiodo as well. How are you doing?
Doing great, thank you. Thanks.
Good. And we got Simon flying in from Japan. How are you doing this afternoon, Simon?
Very good. Good to see you again, Dave. It's been a while.
Okay. All right. So guys, yeah, let's learn about Audiodo. Please give us the introduction.
Audiodo, a company from Sweden, and I'll run you through a little bit of the history and background of the company. We were established as a spin out from Sony Ericsson, based in Malmö, Sweden.
Yeah.
We leverage obviously over 3 decades of expertise in acoustical algorithms, pioneering cutting edge audio, and the core of what we do is personalization and personalized sound. We're a passionate, enthusiast audio team with a big, strong research background, and Jonas will talk more about that. Mainly doing high-end DSP programming, firmware integration into Bluetooth chipsets of audio devices. It was born by ensuring that music lovers could hear music as it's intended to be heard and perfected for their hearing profile, basically.
Okay.
As I was mentioning, we started as a spin out from Sony Ericsson. It was part of a sort of a research project at Sony Ericsson. That's where the research began back before 2015. And the company was sort of ID'd around 2015 from an ex-Sony Ericsson colleague. He then was joined by two more founders in 2016. And that's when sort of the product conceptualization started. It took until 2017 until the company was actually founded. They were working sort of by themselves for a few years. And in 2017, it was founded. Different name back in those days, but we'll stay with Audiodo for now. By 2019, just 2 years after the founding year, we actually got our first product launch. This was made by a US global brand, Skull Candy. So we launched the first few products already back then. Obviously, pandemic came in. It was a little bit of a still for a few years. You know, the audio industry went down a bit, stagnated. But now we're back in full force. We have some 5-6 different OEM customers and growing. We've added new technology. We'll speak a bit more on that at the end, but we'll really go through the core of our technology, which Jonas will explain, which is the personal sound and the hearing assessment. But we've added features like spatial, personal transparency. And obviously, we look to the future and see where we can go. There was a recent announcement, as all of you may know, by Apple the other day about their forte into personal sound, which we are super happy about. We think this will trigger even more demand. And also, obviously, they're going into sort of the OTC hearing aid type of market, where we're also spending some research and technology. So we'll see what is there to come, but we are super excited about the future as well.
Okay.
And if we just talk a little bit about our mission statement, and I'll leave this here. I mean, the foundation was really to hear what you've been missing. And Jonas will explain why that slogan. And I mean, we're inventing the future of sound, and then our goal is to be in a world where technology elevates the human experience of sound. So that's what we're about. And with this, I'll hand over to Jonas.
All right. Yes, so I will speak predominantly about how do you do personal sound, and this kind of like is the basis for it. Like, it's a Audiodo personal sound. It's technology that improves the conditions of a listening experience based on your personal capabilities to perceive sound. And I want to be able to speak about it. I'm going to speak a little bit about what we mean with personal capabilities to perceive sound first. And I want to preface with this slide. This is from the WHO World Report on Hearing in 2022, and it kind of shows, the state of hearing globally. So one thing that comes out in this report is that we're seeing an increase in people that have some kind of hearing loss. Typically, when we speak about hearing loss and hearing aid, for instance, we look at people who have a hard time or starting to get a hard time to understand language, speech, and function in a normal situation, and this is typically with moderately severe or even worse hearing loss. Then, but there is a scale. So it's like even if we have these people with the more severe hearing losses, there is a lot that can be done for the people ranging from normal up to moderate hearing loss too. So typically when you define these groups, it's defined by an average of the distance from a normal, healthy 20 to 30-year-old on your best ear, and the frequencies 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000 hertz. So a mild hearing loss is defined as you need to have more than, I think it's 20 to 35 dB difference on average on your best ear in the full range, 1,000 to 8,000 hertz. Now, that's pretty substantial already with a mild hearing loss. And if you look then at normal hearing variation, you could have fairly normal hearing, but then have, for instance, a noise-induced hearing damage that gives you a small banded disability on your one ear, but you're still considered to hear perfectly normal. Our target group is predominantly normal to up to moderate. Like we're trying to move and do things for people who have more severe loss as well, but our main focus is normal to moderate. And seeing how you define normal, you can have a substantial effect using hearing compensation, even if you have normal hearing, dependent on what your hearing looks like. So the example was a small banded noise-induced damage on one ear, for instance, will still label you as a normal hearing variation. But there is a lot that can be done in such a case to balance both on a frequency level and left-right balancing. So we have this image too to kind of just show the overview of the whole hearing system. So starting from the medium, we have a sound reproduction device such as a headphone that transmits sound waves into your ear, goes through the ear canal, the eardrum transmits it further to the middle ear, and then in the inner ear, in the cochlea, is where you get this. You divide the sound waves into frequency components by using the basilar membranes, and this is typically then where a lot of hearing loss, for instance, by age and similar, has to do with the health of your basilar membrane. The signals are then sent into the nervous system, where a lot of analysis is done to understand and make sense out of the information before it then is processed in the different parts of the brain, depending on if you are thinking about a localization or a balance, to understand where does something come from, what is my position in a room, is also done by the brain using fine phase differences in the transients inside the room, or reflections.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see that to really have a full, rich experience of sound, we need to think about all of this. This is kind of just what this picture is showing. I then have this too. This is an example. This is not a real data, but it kind of just shows the different parts of how loudness sensitivity works, and what happens if you have a loudness recruitment, so a heightened hearing threshold. So typically we have this region when we start to hear a sound. We look at small banded stimuli here too. So you start hearing a sound, and then it goes pretty quickly up that you start to perceive it. And then you have a more or less linear relation between input intensity changing and how much you perceive that intensity change. But if you have a hearing loss, then you will not only start hearing at a higher level, but you will also have this like steeper inclination. So you will be more sensitive to loudness changes when you hear. There is also this range then in the higher parts where you start to converge with loud volumes to a normal hearing, and in the very loud parts you have this compressive, where you don't really perceive that much of a difference in loudness anymore, even if you change the intensity. It's just loud, kind of. So all in all, research has shown that the way that we use headphones, our lifestyles, and general noise exposure is driving the amount of reduced hearing upwards. And this is something that we find to be troublesome, and in the agreement with WHO, then when we hear these or have these kind of hearing variations with a heightened threshold, we tend to compensate it automatically by increasing the volume to get a more balanced and more well-informed input. So then you have this situation where you listen at high volume levels, and then you get hearing fatigue, and you can listen at low levels, and if you then have a hearing loss, this tends to be more demanding on the neural system and the brain to make sense out of the information, so you get general fatigue. So our ambition is to, if we can improve the conditions and give you a more balanced information for your brain to make sense of, we can reduce the amount of volume needed for you to listen at a comfortable level, so you can enjoy music, for instance, and hopefully in the long term increase the longevity of your hearing. And like Michel said, like a lot of us here, we're music enthusiasts, and we are really compassionate about this too. So we care about the experience, and we care about hearing because we want to enjoy music for a long time.
Right.
So it's very important.
And just a question, I guess, or maybe like a comment. So I've heard that one of the first indications of hearing loss is your inability to detect directionality. And so does that have to do with the unevenness of the thresholds on either ear? Or where's the root of that?
I mean, there are a lot of different hearing losses, but so typically, if you have, for instance, a noise-induced hearing, or let's say H. So with H, you typically get this deterioration of the high frequency content, and the high frequency content, we make sense out of direction a lot dependent on the difference between left and right. So if we start losing that information on one side, then it becomes a lot harder for the brain to understand where that comes from. It's not that common, I think, with like hearing loss at the low frequencies, but at low frequencies, typically 500 hertz and less, the brain is more looking at the phase difference to understand directionality than distance, because the sound waves are just going straight through the head. So it depends on the characteristics of your hearing loss.
Okay, so that generalization is probably more to do with age-related hearing loss, where the high frequency, and they're kind of like, you call your grandmother and she doesn't know where you're coming from, is kind of from those kind of. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Let's keep going.
Yeah. All right. So I will talk then a little bit how we approach this to do something about it. So we have our technology is based is two parts. One part is the core technology, which exists integrated into the headphones to enable us to give high performance DSP DSP processing, and it also allows us to with high precision do pure tone audiometry, which is what we use to do hearing tests on our products. On the app side, it's more like a control interface to communicate with the headphones and control then our hearing test, or to load a profile, a hearing profile or similar. So we've spent a lot of time to really dig into having a high quality hearing test, and we go with PTA, or this pure tone audiometry, because it gives it's fairly well known, is used by most audiometry or audiologists. When you go to your audiologist and do a test, it's typically a pure tone audiometry test, and it gives good information about both frequency-wise where issue could be, but also gives you this level of threshold, where your threshold is. So this picture kind of shows us doing comparative study to see how well does our hearing tests on target devices match what you would get with a audiometer, and we see that our results are pretty good. We have not that much error, and this is really the baseline. If we can't get a good hearing test or a good hearing result, then it's very hard to give somebody a good compensation for their hearing. So let's see. So this is more like an overview of the principle that we try to give the end user. So typically our customer, they will have a signature sound. They of course want the end user to experience that signature sound, but dependent on your hearing, then you will get something that looks like the top row here, where what you perceive is affected substantially by your capability to hear. And so with our compensation in place, in combination with the user hearing, we bring it a lot closer to something that sounds like it was intended with the tuning and the signature sound of the headphones. We also do this volume dependent, of course, looking at how loudness recruitment and sensitivity works. So this example kind of shows a personalized version of the Harman curve for with 3 different volume levels, where you can see at the higher levels you get something on left and right that looks very much like the Harman curve, but the further we go down in volume, the more we will adapt to give you what you need to experience it.
Kind of like is that when you showed that curve earlier of perceived intensity versus input intensity, it's kind of trying to stretch that, isn't it, to turn into the left-hand side curve, the normal hearing curve.
Exactly. So this is to do this is not trivial. We of course use the hearing results as an input. We also have to know a lot about the headphones acoustic performance and the context where our DSP algorithm is running in. So all this we put into our psychoacoustic modeling, where we determine what do we want to give the end user. And this is, I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is where our secret sauce exists. Okay. And out comes then different parameters for our DSP algorithms to actually make it happen in reality. So I wanted to kind of close this with some examples, because I think it becomes easier to understand a little bit more with some real examples. So this is John. John has I actually looked at this and I think he has a mild hearing loss. It's not moderate, even if some of the test points here go down to 50 dBHL. So he has a pretty high loss at the high frequencies, but considering then how WHO defines these borders, it would be considered a mild hearing loss due to how much better his good air is. But so when we look at the RMS spectra with and without his profile compensation activated, we can see here that when we play at a higher level, we do a little bit, not that much. When we play at a lower level, we do substantially more. It's a little bit tricky to look at the curves like this, so we tend to want to look at it as the difference between the RMS curves instead, and that will give you this. Notice that this his hearing test is gone here, but it's the same profile. And so here you can see what we do at the low volume to compensate, and then at a higher volume we do similar but much less. And then the really interesting for me is then, okay, so let's look at somebody with a normal hearing. So this is Peter. Peter has a perfectly normal hearing. Maybe he has gotten some kind of a noise-induced hearing damage. This typically starts at 4 kilohertz and then grows deeper and wider as the damage furthers. But so in this case, he is hearing perfectly normal, but we can still do a lot for him, as you can see, to kind of balance out the frequency balance, in particular in the higher frequency ranges here. So this is low volume, high volume again, and then Linda is a very good example of somebody else with a normal hearing. But this, I think, is a problem. I've met quite a few people who experience this, where you hear fairly normal, but you have a shift towards one side. So like every headphone you put on will pull the sound towards the right side or the left side, and this is true for Linda here. So at low volumes, we kind of do a lot to make that balance much more balanced, and then again going to a higher volume, you see we still do quite substantial left-right different processing to give her a more balanced experience, so to say.
Can I interrupt quickly? I just got a quick question. This notation
Yeah.
HXA, what is that notation?
Okay, so the H is a classical way of denoting a transfer function. So this is like the hearing APS hearing transfer function. Yeah, the X is is for this this specific profile or this use case. So it's just kind of show. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, and so this is my final slide to kind of conclude. So we really believe that we have to take care of the details to give people a good experience with this. So from the input, we need to have accurate hearing assessments. It's crucial for us to be able to do anything. If you don't have that, you can't do anything in this field, we believe. And the output is also very important because we are integrated into chips with typically Bluetooth, and we have to consider the digital realm that we exist in and the quality of sound to really do something that doesn't compromise the quality while still be able to change and adapt the sound substantially. So these are the two things that really are key to us.
Okay.
Yeah. So
can you just go back, say one curve? I'm just curious about one thing. So maybe one more is a better example. Yeah, even that one is not so severe. Maybe the more severe one that I'm getting to the point is, some of them you've got almost 10 dB of difference there. Is it a struggle in terms of how much headroom is actually available in the system?
Yeah, so
everybody wants to be able to go quite loud, but in order to have this relatively large shift.
I feel like this. I can't go into the details of answering how we do this because this is part of our magic that we can, when we can give and how much. But there are times, I would guess, where we want to give more than what we can without compromising the sound. But for the most part, we can.
So, okay, at low volume, you've got plenty of room, let's say, but as you get to high volume, it's going to tend to compress down anyway. So you don't necessarily have the same demand. Looks like that, perhaps. Another one, how much of a struggle or how do you deal with people have to do their own hearing test effectively characterized by themselves? How do you make that robust? And because I've had to go with them before, and there seems to be a trade-off between how long it takes you to go through and get a very clean result and how much patience you've got to actually sit through it.
Absolutely. I think that's one of our main discussion points here too. I would say that we have found a place where we feel fairly confident about the results without it taking too much time. But I think we have we are constantly looking forward, and I think that in the future there will be some ways where you can maybe do it more detailed, for instance, or I would say that the trickiest part about the hearing test is the environment where you do the hearing test in can have a substantial effect on the results, and that is very hard for us to control.
So with that said, maybe the marketing answer here is, I mean, we've found a sweet spot, as Jonas said. We think we have a graphical user interface and the way we do it so that it becomes not a compromise for the consumer or a challenge for the consumers to go through the process. So we're typically in the sales pitch, we're talking about 3 minutes or less. Of course, this all depends on the user. They can take longer if they want to be very accurate and take their time and be concentrated. It can go longer, of course. It's up to the consumer how they interface it. But it's an average of just below 3 minutes. And again, referencing to what Apple just announced, they talk about a 5-minute hearing assessment test, pure tone as well. So we're, without knowing all the details of Apple yet, because it's not launched, we believe it's very similar to what we do. And we've been doing this for now 7 years plus. So we think we have a good way of doing the hearing test.
Yep. And just from an implementer's point of view, say someone who's a licensee, I guess license or anything, one thing that would just bother me is to what extent do you have to control your headphones frequency response? And who's responsible for that? The customers send you their headphones, like, hey, this is my final, golden sample, base it off that, or you sort of have to go through quite a few iterations?
So the way that we approach it is that our algorithms will make sure that we don't that our compensation lies, let's say, outside of the characteristics of the headphones. So even if they were to change it doesn't change how we compensate. But depending on how it is changed, it might change the way that we need to, or what we need to consider for our hearing test to be accurate.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that part of the going through the hearing test process is actually going to compensate to some extent for the variation of headphones as well?
Yeah, we do. We do tuning for our hearing test on a number of headphones. We look at left-right variation. We look at sample variation. We look at repeatability. So I would say that's from our side, it's a fairly robust technology or approach, and quite similar to, in a way, how the same principles are applied in the audiometry world. If you do a headphone that is for hearing tests, they also have to go through this standard, and we even if we can't say that our headphones are 100% following that standard, it follows the same approach and same principles.
Yeah. Okay. And again, just from an implementer's point of view, what's required from the customers in terms of what they need to be capable of for firmware and electronics design?
I would say from the electronics design, not that much. Like I would say most customers or that we have been in contact with now, they do design, but they have ODM that does the integration and the firmware. A lot of times also external companies that write the firmware. What we deliver is typically patch based, so dependent on how specific or how far you have gone away from the standard like SDKs that are delivered by the different chip brands. It's just a patch. You just apply the patch and then we're integrated.
Okay. And from an app integration?
Yeah, that one is I have to say that's not my forte, but I know that we've had a varied I don't know, I'd say it's like experiences with that. Sometimes it works very well. Sometimes it's a little struggle. And also, again, it's a lot of times we have app firms that the third parties that does it, and sometimes it feels like they don't know Bluetooth that well, and I would say that that's the big thing.
I have that joke in my mind with the app developer. It says, I've read through all the documentation, everything's fine. Just had one question. What is BLE? Okay, I'll be the right partner, to be honest.
I was just going to jump in and say, I mean, we have two models for the app. We do either a skinned app for customers who don't have an app today or have very limited functionality on the app. They can basically get our reference app and then we skin it with their look and feel. And then the other model is obviously libraries, APIs, where they integrate it into their app. And you could, of course, argue, depending on where they are, if they are already having an app and have an internal team or external team, that varies a lot in the experience, as Jonas said. But also coming back to the key item, it's typically not the app and function. It's really the protocol and Bluetooth and the sort of interactions between the firmware and the app in terms of Bluetooth knowledge.
Yep. So I'll just rephrase it. The question is coming from the point of view is brands with a lot of engineering expertise, no problems. But is it something that's accessible to brands that are a bit further down the chain, let's say, that are using OEMs essentially for everything, but they still want to incorporate this type of feature?
Yeah, I mean, we've supported all the variations of customers from the left side to right side of what you just explained. And so far, we have not delivered a launch. So that means we tend to give a lot of support. We help the customer to launch because at the end of the day, we have a business model which is royalty based on produced units and chipped units. So if they don't launch, we don't make money. There's some upfront fees sometimes, but we do a lot to help our customers to get to a successful launch.
Okay, and one more. What about Bluetooth chips? What are we looking at?
We're supporting the most common ones. I mean, Qualcomm, Iroha, BS, even Bluetron, Wuxi, Geely. So, I mean, really the guys that are out there. Depends on the brands where they are. We see a lot of BS coming now. Qualcomm, of course, has always been there, Iroha. But Bluetron and Geely, I mean, those have been more in the low-end field where typically these type of features has not been there because of programmability of the chips. But all of them now have chips that are open to third-party software. So, a range depending really on the OEM and quite sometimes on the ODM. Actually, some OEMs want to use a platform, but the ODM they choose don't work with that platform. They have to adapt, and then we'll adapt. Our first time with each platform is obviously a bit more cumbersome. It's the first porting. We need to see the ADKs and the SDKs and the chipset architecture and the acoustic chain, but typically we manage. But the first lift to a new platform can be a bit more cumbersome, but typically it's pretty straightforward.
I can imagine it must be quite a struggle, especially for some of the brands like you mentioned, Geely, to get help from them and sufficient look at their low-level code.
Yeah, I think we have very good relationships with all of them and get pretty good support. But unfortunately, sometimes the support lacking is depending on the OEM. If they are sometimes smaller, they don't get the attention or the support, and a lot of these OEMs tend to shift platforms from project to project because of that reason. So that's a struggle, but yeah, we've been able to manage it pretty well so far.
Awesome, thanks.
I have a few wrap-up slides just to give you a little bit more about. So this was our core technology, our baseline. And if you look at our portfolio, we use this personal sound as a baseline for all our features. Some of them you can use with and without personal sound. Obviously, our view is that you should always use them with personal sound as you then get your unique hearing profile. So personal sound that Jonas just mentioned and all those details, that's Audiodo personal sound. We have our equalizer that is, you could argue why equalizer, everybody has it, but it's a very intuitive, nice 3 toggles, but you get the full width of a true equalizer, but much more easy to use and much more dynamic in real time. We like it quite a lot and gives ease of use from an app perspective from a mobile phone. Then our new flagship, which is Audiodo Transparency and actually personal transparency. This is something that Apple also talked about in their launch. We basically do a full acoustic transparency to be able to hear your environment. And then on top of that, we apply your personal profile. So you get sort of an enhancement on your transparency. Actually, you will If you have some variation, you will hear better with transparency on, so meaning your earbuds on than not. Sort of a light hearing aid type of device, you could argue, functionality. We also have some PSAP, part of our transparency solution, meaning you can gain, which is something that, again, Apple was talking about in their OTC device. And then the final is our Audiosphere, which is more or less our spatial portfolio. We have a few different versions of spatial, some fixed static, HRTF based, some more 3D space, also HRTF, where you can sort of create your room, and then gyro based, which is head tracking. So this is sort of the portfolio, and we're expanding. And if you look at my last slide, no, actually, there's one slide before. We also have something which we call our sort of shield or protect, which is a knowledge hub. Talks about why all of the things that Jonas explained of impacting hearing and sort of, yeah, all the things that WHO talks about and how you can avoid degrading even more. But then also as a protective measure, which is sort of a volume limiter that you can set so that you don't go beyond certain volume levels. And we're also looking into some type of track your listening, so you actually get statistics of how you're using your headphones and how you're listening. This is something that's being launched. All the others are more or less launched. Some features, of course, still fine-tuning. This is the last piece of it. And then, obviously, if we go to my last wrap-up slide, we have evolved our personal sound since 2017 to today. So we've been doing this for a few years, as I said, and we've actually had a few iterations and generations where we sort of polished it and improved our psychoacoustic modeling. We have then, in the recent years, added to our portfolio, which is the slide I just showed about the different products that we now have, the different features. And of course, looking into the future, we see a lot more coming. And with the baseline we have, a lot of people are talking about filtering out certain noise or sound. AI is coming. Machine learning is coming on audio side as well. So we're looking at how we can add additional things on the existing portfolio and new features. And yeah, that's Audiodo.
Great. And I was corrected on how to pronounce Audiodo because I was saying it wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. Everybody has their own way, but it's sort of, how do you do? How do you do? It's a word of play there.
Cool. Oh, that's a great introduction. Thanks for that. Any final questions, Simon?
No, I'm good.
All right. So yeah, thanks to Michel and Jonas for educating us on Audiodo. Encourage people. We'll put the link to their website below, and anybody interested can reach out or chuck your comment down below. And of course, like, subscribe, and share this out to all your friends. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.